Thank you so much for listening to the Pound This Podcast. Disclaimer. This is the disclaimer on this episode. This episode of the Pound This Podcast is marked as explicit, which I very rarely do, but I'm doing that basically to wave a flag saying that this is a little out of the norm. This is unedited. There's language in here that you may be sensitive to. We discuss sex, sexuality, body parts. And if you feel like this is an uncomfortable conversation for you, or you may be triggered by some of the themes or the conversations in this podcast, I would urge you to skip listening to this podcast or find a place where you feel more comfortable listening to it. Maybe you have someone in the car that you don't want to listen to this podcast with. You prefer to be alone. This is your warning that this is a podcast that is unedited and discusses these themes if you are sensitive to these themes. But I do feel like this is an important conversation to have. I feel sexuality is a part of human health, and I have personally not heard the discussion about sex and sexuality through a weight loss journey. And Richelle and I have a really great conversation about that and kind of what that means. And I really do hope that you give this a listen. But again, a disclaimer: language, adult themes, explicit episode. So you have been warned, but I do appreciate you listening so much, and I hope that you give this episode a listen. And if you want to hear more episodes like this and discuss more themes like this, please let me know. You can always find me on my email, which is amanda@amandavалентиnebites.com.
I want to lose weight, but I don't know how to get started.
What should I meal prep every week?
How do I get those sweet booty gains?
Inspiration for your healthy lifestyle. The Pound This Podcast with Amanda Valentine.
Thank you so much for listening to the Pound This Podcast. I am Amanda Valentine, and my guest today is Richelle Frabotta. I'm here at Miami University. Hey, Richelle.
Hey, Amanda.
So you teach here at Miami.
I do. I am an instructor in the Family Science and Social Work Department. And I also get to coordinate the Dennis L. Carlson Sexuality Education Studies Center.
So what does that all mean?
Oh, it's the love of my life. The Sex Ed Center. So I'm a 28-year sexuality educator. And not only do I teach here at Miami, but I've also for 28 years been bouncing around Southwest Ohio and across the country. And so pretty much if somebody said, hey, can you come teach this to fourth graders, or I'd like you to train staff about this, then that's what I do.
Okay.
And I love it. My job is fabulous.
So what is teaching at Miami? How is that different than just the health class I took high school?
Oh, way different.
Yeah.
Right. Well, first of all, depending upon ages, your health class in high school didn't cover sexuality.
No, not really at all.
Yeah, it probably didn't even cover a correct name for body parts or what they do or what you'd like them to do for pleasure. Those are pretty popular topics that don't get covered in K through 12. And I know the 20-year-olds that I work with, the undergrads that I teach here at Miami, definitely didn't get anything related to healthy sexuality. They're all victims of abstinence only until marriage programming.
Yeah.
So no, in my 300-level course I have 2 sections a semester, and I have about 140, 150. Between those 2 sections, we cover the stuff they should have had in K through 12.
So, like, what are you walking out of your classroom knowing that you didn't know before? Like, I didn't have that education. I probably need some of that.
Right.
Even though I'm in my 30s.
Right. Well, and that's just it. So this is why I have a job for 28 years, right? I mean, you know, accountants, you can quit one accounting job and go down the street to the next accounting office and get a job. But as a sexuality educator, my stuff is in high demand, but everybody's awkward and uncomfortable. And, the federal government hasn't paid for sexuality education the way that I do it since the 90s. So I'm happy to do my job. And, yeah, there's a lot. I think probably... I ask students, 3, 5, 10 years later, if they hit me up for questions or comments or just want to say, hey, look, I did this. I ask them, what's some stuff that was important when you were here that you picked up? And endocrine system's number one. Most of my 20-year-olds, and probably a lot of 30-year-olds I know, don't exactly know when they can get pregnant. Don't understand. There's so much myth out there that if you take birth control pills for too long, then it'll derail your ability to get pregnant. This is ridiculous thinking. So I think the most important thing to convey is as a sexuality educator, I teach medically accurate, research-supported information. So when I cover the endocrine system, it's, a mini lecture in biology and physiology. And then, because they're 20-year-olds and not sixth graders, we talk about pleasure. We talk about, what are those parts and why wasn't the G-spot named until the early 70s? And, who is Dr. Whipple who named the G-spot? And we kind of put context around it as well.
Oh, awesome. Man, see, I got so many questions. That's for another podcast.
Yeah, let's do another one. Yeah.
But this one I wanted to talk about because I feel like, and we were just discussing before we started recording, and I feel like this is such an important topic that I've never heard discussed. And it's something that going through my own weight loss journey, and still living it and just being a human and having body image issues, which I feel like probably I could safely say at least most women have, that going through a weight loss journey specifically, thinking, especially me, because I was obese my whole life. I mean, I never knew anything other than that. And, then yo-yo dieting for over a decade. And you think you have this idea in your mind of at least, for me to bring myself personally in this, of just cover up and shame in my, I would, in gym class in grade school, I would be the only girl that changed in a bathroom stall, and I got made fun of because I didn't want to change my clothes in front of any other girls because they'd pick on me because I was the fat girl.
Absolutely.
And so that obviously plays into sexuality and into relationships that I had of I don't want anyone to see me. This is shameful. I hate my body, and to cover up. And you have this idea of oh, well, once I lose this weight and I'm quote unquote hot and I'm thin, oh, well, then I'm just going to be porn star. I'm just going to feel so hot and I'm going to be so into it, and it's just going to change. And you feel like you're going to just be so into your body. And then it isn't necessarily the case, where it's oh, well, I still have all this head stuff and in body image things, and how that, still plays of you can't view yourself another way. And so you think that your sex life will change. And sometimes it doesn't. And I kind of just want to, that's a broad sweeping thing here to ask you your opinion on that.
No, you nailed it. And let me just say, sister, so I'm in my 50s, and at most I weighed just under 400 pounds, and at least I weighed 180. And so although my weight loss and yo-yo dieting, I think we have probably some stuff in common, my story is different.
Yeah.
So I lived it too. And, 12 years of Catholic education and changing into uniforms as well for gym class, or when we went to the pool and having to figure out about swimsuits. And, fat in the 80s is a different kind of fat than it is in the 2000s. So I think that's an interesting concept too, is I think I was a size 10 and I was fat. And now when I think about size 10, I don't think about that's a fat size.
Oh, I don't either.
So just, shout out to you. Hey, I'm here. I get it too on a personal level. And the sexuality stuff is so important. Such fat phobia in our culture, you said it, when I lose this weight and I get hot. And we don't necessarily think about large people, fat people, obese people as hot. And that's a cultural thing, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you had to learn to hate your body.
Yeah.
You didn't pop out going, oh, this flab under my arms, know. Yeah. So I think our conversation is rooted in the idea of cultural messages. And you said, female women, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of dudes walking around who, cut weight for their sport and develop eating disorders doing that. There's a lot of dudes. And dudes talk to me, which I'm so grateful for, because, we can read this stuff in books, but when someone's looking you in the face and telling you their story, man, that's priceless. And so I've heard guys' stories about not being the right kind of muscular or the right kind of jawline. And so taking other people's ideas about what is sexy and putting it on yourself, I mean, yeah, it's a turmoil. It's hard to deal with that.
Is there any way to like, other than just self-reflection, talk to a therapist? Is there any way to
right on? Like, shout out to the clinicians. Yeah. I mean, we all find our own way, right? I mean, I think again, getting older in aging process, my ideas of beauty have changed. How about yours? I mean,
oh yeah, for sure.
Right, and of course, some of that, since we're talking about body size and we're talking about how we look, I know that at any size, I could be sexy, but not always sexy to the person or the people that I wanted to attract.
Yeah.
And then that's a hard conversation to have with myself. So I think, yeah, sure, therapists, great. Best friends, great. But I think ultimately at the end of the day, when you shut your eyes and go to sleep, you kind of got to figure out, you kind of got to own your shit.
Yeah.
And that's what this is about, I think.
So do you feel with like the students and the people that you talk to, do you feel like if somebody has like a poor sexual relationship that usually stems from a body confidence, body image sort of thing?
Yeah. So I'd say one issue is body confidence. I'm trying to even remember, like, I'm trying to give you a number in my head, but I can't come up with one. This story is so popular about young women in particular who want to be sexual, who embrace their sexuality, who look forward to having sex, but have to make sure that the lights are off, or keep their shirts on. And so, sex is just a thing that happens on the bottom part. And, and are talking about how great sex is. And then, my comment gently and with love, right? Because I'm not trying to tell anybody how they're supposed to do stuff. That's not my job, right? I'm not mom.
Yeah.
I'm not sister. I'm just somebody saying, well, this thing about sexual pleasure, it's kind of a full body thing, don't you think? It's not really about that part or that position, but it's about like touch. And if your shirt's on, or you make sure there's a blanket between you or some kind of cover. I said, how do you feel about, not having that touch, that warmth, that physical skin-to-skin connection, and skin hunger is the thing. There are plenty of people walking around that don't get touched or hugged, just in a casual way, not even thinking in like a sexual way.
Yeah.
And so I try to talk about those things. And does that supersede your need to feel like you look okay? Also, there's the catch-22 is, and again, this is personal value, so I'm not here to tell people how they should think, feel, and believe. And I wonder that if you're embarrassed to take off your shirt with this person that you're being sexual with, what's up with that? What is that? Just a difficult conversation to have, so you don't have it, or do you think they won't like you? I mean, isn't sex about being vulnerable? And isn't it very vulnerable, to say, hey, I don't feel comfortable with, you looking at my breasts, so I'm going to leave my shirt on. And wouldn't that enhance the sexual relationship? I'm just thinking out loud, right? I mean, and then, if it's a hookup or it's a hit it and get it, fine. You don't need no deep conversation, right? Yeah. So that's cool. Like I said, there's not just one right way to do this, but especially in like long-term committed relationships, sex changes, right? Your bodies change. Growing older, whether we're talking about weight or not, changes. Function changes. And to your point, being in your 30s and not having had, I would say probably quality sexuality education in your schools that you've gone to, right?
Yeah.
Nobody talks about that either.
It's like everything that you have, your education is through like media, like TV and movies, and what your idea of what being sexy is, and, the signs that somebody's really into you, and like what sex looks like this view of a sexual relationship through some rom-com. It feels like what, at least the education I got is just in front of a TV screen. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, and let's take that and extend your metaphor to pornography, which I call adult erotica, because that's what it is. It's for adults and it's erotic. They're supposed to be. And, porn pussy's a thing. Are you familiar with that term?
I am not.
Well, let's talk about it. So when we think about typical, I'll just say mainstream porn, not like genre porn, vulvas look a certain way. They're shaved, or they have a cute little design in hair there. Sometimes they're vajazzled with little rhinestones or whatever. Be careful of that. Especially, it's a choking hazard. I'm just saying.
Well, don't want to get something to get lost.
Just saying. So when we think about, how many young people today are learning about sex, it's through moving pictures. It's through either purposefully or accidentally watching porn. And porn is the number one sex educator in the United States. I wish it was me.
Yeah.
I wish it was teachers who teach K through 12, but it's not. And so I get 20-year-olds in my classrooms who think sex is a certain way. And more important to our conversation, they think that vulvas are supposed to be, that the labia are even, that, there's no gaps, that the smaller labia, the internal labia is supposed to be tucked in. Kind of like, I'd say like a Barbie doll, but Barbie dolls don't even have vulvas. So,
yeah.
That's a body image thing for sure. And if your hooch don't look like that and you think it's supposed to,
yeah.
And then you may add weight on your body in a way that you don't see represented in adult erotica, or to your point, you don't see represented in ads on TV or talked about, in just magazine articles, then you're kind of lost.
Yeah. Well, it turns into, you think this idea is like, oh, you have this slim, trim body. And then in reality, you're like, oh, I hope you don't touch my fat roll. Like, don't,
right.
you like shiver. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, just like this, ooh, they touched a part that I don't like. And it's just like, that's where your head's at. 'Cause you're just like, oh, well, they watch porn, or they've seen what my view of it is. And so when they're not touching or seeing that, they must be slumming it to be with me right now. Oh, you know what I mean?
It's so painful. Yeah. No, I hear you. And that makes me so sad. And it's such a real thing. You're speaking truth. And why? When we think about this idea again of connecting with another human being, whether it's like in a marriage or a dating situation or Tinder. Yeah. What is the point? Is the point to connect? Is the point to feel good when you're done? And if sex doesn't feel good because you aren't happy with your body, then I think we do need to do some interventions. Yeah. And I don't know what the right answers are. I don't pretend to know what the right answers are, but I guess, being a sex-positive person, a sex-positive teacher, it's supposed to feel good. And if you leave that situation going, oh, you touched my fat roll, then I think we should work on that. I think there's something there so that sex does feel good at the end when it's over.
This is a super broad, generic question. How important is a healthy sex life in just your life in general?
Right. Well, did I say I have job security? It is important, I think. I think, connecting and relating on that level, it's very important. And, shout out to folks who are asexual. Shout out to folks who abstain from sex or sex behaviors on purpose. Head nod to folks who, for their vocation, will not be sexual people, like nuns and priests. Hello, did I mention my Catholic background? Mm-hmm. So with great respect, and not thinking of them specifically, but thinking of just typical folk, I think sex is a way to communicate. Sex is a way to share joy. Being physically intimate with somebody. And by the way, I should probably say when I say sex, I don't just mean penis-vagina intercourse, because in being an inclusive educator, it's not just about those two parts. Yeah. Which is kind of how we started with the whole, body connection thing. Mm-hmm. Sex is supposed to feel good. Sexual health and wellness is key, and I think it's greatly undervalued. And people prefer not to pay attention or prefer not to address it.
Well, it's like it has all of these rules and opinions put on. I mean, just because it's so timely right now at the time of recording this, of talking about the Super Bowl halftime show.
Dig it.
So, I mean, we're going from where we have two women, dancing and, doing their thing and
doing it very well.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. Like doing that, like in that outfit with all that hair like in heels.
That pole work alone.
Oh, my God. Yeah. But it's just like this, they're entertainers and they're out there entertaining. And then it just goes into, it feels like the nation is split between like, yeah, you go girl, I'm empowered, and slut. And so it's like, then you also have someone like Lizzo who's out there doing that. And it's, you have the same sort of like half and half reaction of a like, well, then you have two different kinds of body types. And it's like all this confusion of like, what am I, what is empowering and what's slutty, and like it just seems like this whole just mixed up, stirred up, like I don't know, it's like almost like this fever pitch sort of right. I don't know, my Facebook feeds all sorts of turmoil. I'm just gonna dump that all on you. What are your thoughts on all of that?
Well, I might have cut a few Facebook friends right now, I'm just saying. Yeah, so again, I don't pretend to have any answers, but you're right, it's a conundrum. I mean, many of us use external forces to feel validated. I think one of the worst things on the planet is to be invisible. And I mean, you're talking to a middle-aged lady with purple hair and tattoos, right? I mean, I want to be seen. My self-expression says, I am here. You can't miss me, and you're going to talk about me after I leave. Mm-hmm. And, depending on who you are, you might say some bad stuff. But here's, at the end of the day, this is me. I don't have to do what I do. I dress a certain way. I look a certain way. I present, which, by the way, is the definition of sexuality, is your identity. It's not just who you fall in love with and who you may or may want to not have sex with. It's how you present. And, what you wear on a third date isn't necessarily what you're going to wear to temple, right? I mean, so shout out to Lizzo, because she's, at the end of the day, she's doing it for her. Mm-hmm. And making some good money. I'm pretty sure she makes more than I do. But,
yeah.
So I'm sure there's lots of other reasons, but, and she's a hella flute player, and, there's talent there. I wonder sometimes maybe it's not just, the body's just easy to go for. Yeah. Maybe the haters are just, it's not rocket science to look at a big girl and call her a name. Yeah. It doesn't take much depth or whatever, intelligence to do that. Mm-hmm. And so maybe that's the conversation. But I'm pretty sure, and I don't know Lizzo, I don't know J-Lo. I would hang with Shakira in a heartbeat. So if they listen, let's have a moment. But the bottom line is, we get to answer to ourselves. And I think at 12 years old, I didn't know that. I think at 20 years old, I was starting to figure it out. I think at 30, I had so many other things to deal with, like living a life, like full-time job, figuring out a house, right? Yeah. Starting families, right? What do we do in our 30s? But I'll tell you, I hit 40, and I was pretty much like, here's my middle finger. And at 50, I'm pretty much unstoppable. And no, I don't want to weigh 400 pounds again. I really don't. I was unhappy. I was unhealthy. And I don't want to weigh 180 either, because, man, when I looked in the mirror and saw dark circles and my shoulder bones up here, that wasn't me either. So I guess I'm going to keep working on what works for me and helping other folks recognize that, when people look at you sideways, you got a couple of choices. Yeah. Eating a Twinkie, I suppose, is a choice. But if you'd rather not eat a Twinkie, then let's talk about other ways to handle it. Mm-hmm. No, yeah.
Have you ever watched the show Shrill?
I haven't, not yet.
Oh, I would highly recommend that then.
I will.
That's an Adie Bryant show, so it's on Hulu.
Oh, right on.
But especially season 1, where it's because she's an overweight woman, mm-hmm. and a lot of it deals with like her life as an overweight woman and how she is seen at work, how is she seen in her relationship, and I feel like there was so much of that show where I'm like, oh God, like just triggered.
You related?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, some of it was like that her boyfriend was like would hide her, like,
oh wow,
and then they were just like, at first they were just hooking up, but like made her leave out the back door sort of thing. Like
Wow.
but she tolerated it because she's like, I'm overweight. I'm taking what I can get, and like how she was like forever on and off diets and dealing with her parents that were just kind of like, ooh, should you be eating that and sort of stuff. But also how she felt in her own body and how she presented herself to the world. I don't know. I just thought it was just such a great example of a TV show that I feel like, myself included, and probably I would imagine a lot of people listening to this podcast just feel too, of just having a difficult time with that, just like being your own person in your own skin and accepting what that is and what you love about yourself and what you're willing to change it's just such a hard conversation, but I guess it all just depends on like where you're at in your life and what is important to you. And if I think I want to have a good sexual relationship in my own head, no matter who I'm going to be with, like that's a conversation I feel like you have to it has to start with you.
And aren't we? I mean, I think what we've done here in this chat is identify two very taboo and difficult topics at least in the United States culture, right? I mean, like you said, you didn't get a sexuality education. I didn't get a sexuality education. I started my sex ed career and didn't know what a uterus was because the coach told me in my health class that it was called a womb. And so we're really undereducated, literally undereducated about that topic. And then when it comes to kind of, being who you are in your body, being comfortable in your skin, we kind of have a long history in the United States of not accepting that, right?
Yeah.
Whether we could be talking about color as well as size or hairstyle. And so, for me, again, where I come from, it's culture. And I guess just going forth and being you is probably the greatest gift you can give to me because I'm going to see you, right?
Yeah.
People who are listening are hearing you. And to be authentic and to be real for me and my value system, man, that's where it's at.
Yeah.
And even if I got this fat roll right here and I'm not happy about it, I may talk to you about it, but I'm going to need some love back, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not going to need somebody to be like, you're too fat to have sex. Are you kidding? Really?
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, community I think would be important, finding that crew that's got your back.
Oh, for sure. I think definitely, because I mean, that's one of the reasons I started this podcast is I just felt like so alone through everything. Like for me and my binge eating and where I was at with my own body and just dealing with my own weight loss, of like no one else wants to hear about this. Nobody else, especially with the binge eating stuff. I'm like, I didn't even know how to identify that myself. And like nobody wants I don't want to burden anybody with hearing my crap. And like it's like, well, wouldn't it be nice if we could just have a space where we could have this? Because I mean, I did Weight Watchers multiple times, and I went to the meetings, and it was never that kind of conversation. It was I did nothing against Weight Watchers because I know it's been super successful for so many people, but the community aspect for me was like, I want to talk about this. Like this is the root of my issues. You know what I mean? This is the dirty work that we need to go through. And it just feels like you're so uncomfortable to have that conversation. It's just, how do we even make that a safe space for people to talk about our relationship with our bodies and our sexual health and our, just communication and our relationship with food and how that ties into everything. It's hard to kind of find those people where you're just like, can we just talk about this and not be angry and get triggered like we do online?
Right. Yeah. I mean, can we still be friends if I say something stupid?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Well, I'm hearing you, and this word just keeps coming up over and over, and it's shame.
Yeah.
That's the word that I keep going to. I don't know if that's what you're thinking about, but the way you were describing it.
Yeah, definitely.
And I don't think as a culture we do shame very well. I mean, I think we shame people very well. I mean, I think there are plenty of folks who know how to do that. But I think you're right. I don't think we process it. I don't think there's really, I'm not aware of many spaces other than, you clinical ones where you go with intention to a particular support group. But I don't know many places where you get to kind of say, hey, I feel shameful about this.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm sure that, so much shame is attached to sex, where it's a good girl, bad girl sort of thing of like, well, good girls don't do this. Or, you know, whatever attachments that you have to, you know, sex. I mean, it seems like that's just in a shame shell for most people, I would guess.
Right. Well, I mean, and so I was just teaching this yesterday because I always start off the semester with the history in the United States of sexuality education, where it comes from and how it got started and who did it and why and what were the motivations. And, you know, at the end of the day, it kind of comes down to control. And that's also a word, control, that I associate with food. Whether I have self-control to follow a plan that makes me feel good, like by eating this or not eating this. I know you meal prep on Sunday. Yeah. And when I was listening to you talk about that, I was like, man, I can't even take my nightgown off on Sundays. I mean, you know, that's really cool. I mean, you're motivated. You stick to the schedule. And I'm like, well, maybe I should think about a Tuesday. Maybe I should meal prep on a Tuesday. So even the idea of you know, control is something I don't know that we talk about a whole lot either, but we sure expect it from me. I expect myself. I expect that I should be in control of my eating. And I think I certainly am not able to lecture on binge eating. Yeah. But I imagine that being out of control is part of that cycle. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there.
So it definitely is. Like for me, like if you're in a binge, it's almost. It's all just, you know, attached to emotions. You have a bad day and it's like overwhelming and it almost feels like a wave that's taking you over and you're trying to eat to numb out. I mean, I could say all this now after years and years of, you know, of analyzing myself, but it's almost like it's not about the food. It's not like, oh my God, this pizza's so good, I just can't stop. It's like I will eat an entire box of stale saltines because I just need to eat. Like you can't, it's like a fever pitch almost.
Would you like to call that overachieving?
Yeah, right. Well, this is like for me, and I'm totally type A control freak when I have control. And so it's just like, I feel like for me to, you know, armchair therapist myself, it's, you know, that's how I knew I could control the food of like, whenever I make myself try to feel better, everything else seems to be skidding out of control, but I can control this. And, you know, just to tie it back into sexual health, it feels like you have another person involved. If we're talking just having, you know, a sexual relationship with a partner, it's like you lose some of that control because you're sharing that with somebody. And that almost feels kind of scary of just like, I can't control how this situation will turn out.
Right.
But with food, I can control exactly what I'm doing.
Totally dig it. I think you nailed it. Right. I mean, and add the vulnerability. And, you know, if somebody sees the McDonald's wrappers in your car and makes a comment about it, then that's a vulnerable moment. Yeah. But you can hide that. There's not much you can hide when you're being sexual with somebody. Yeah. At least I don't think so. I'm quickly thinking about what did I just say? And I guess, you know, I think the point of being physically intimate other than to reproduce, which is what we've all been taught, right? Mm-hmm. Which is really hard if you have two people that own penises and two people that own vaginas. But if you're not reproducing, you know, what is the point? And this is also an activity we do in classroom. There's an activity that I borrowed from another educator, and it's basically 12 reasons why people might say yes to sex. And those reasons range from, like I said, reproduction, all the way to power and control, all the way to some stuff that we would be like, well, that's a horrible reason to say yes to sex. And is that really sex or is that violence? And, you know, shame is in there to numb out. Sometimes people will say yes to sex just to not feel. Yeah. So I guess that's really kind of the critical piece here is when we talk about how we present, and I'll just say in the bedroom, but it could be your kitchen table. It can be, you know, the laundry room. Mm-hmm. It can be outside in a tent, right? So we'll just use that euphemism in the bedroom. But, you know, I guess thinking about what is the point. And if the point is to feel crappy afterwards because you have big thighs and you don't want your partner to somehow see that or know that, then it's probably not the best time to say yes to sex. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, how do you fix it? And if you don't want to fix it, then don't. But yeah, you know, I just really think sex is supposed to feel good, physically and emotionally.
Definitely. I feel like I just like could talk to you all day.
Cool.
But I know that we're both like on a time limit here. So
Sure.
if somebody, are you willing for people to reach out if somebody has a question, or is there a place that somebody could like find you and get more information if they're interested in what you do and what you have to say?
Sure. Yeah. So since I'm on the job at Miami, let's use this information. If you go to the Miami University website, the Sexuality Education Studies Center has a webpage. My email's on there. Yeah, I'm pretty easy to find.
Okay. And I'll put all that in the show notes too. Yeah. And
just tell the sex lady. I'm looking for the sex lady.
Yeah. I mean, there's not those all over campus. You're one of the only ones.
Maybe I could take a break if there were.
I appreciate you coming on this podcast, and you are welcome back. And again, we were talking before we started recording. There's just like so many different aspects and avenues about sexual health that you are welcome back anytime. I would love to have any conversations, and I hope that, you know, somebody listening to this today, it sparked something within them, and maybe to have include a better sexual relationship with themselves and in what they're doing moving forward.
Well, you make it so easy, Amanda. Thanks.
Oh, thank you.
I do feel like we've been hanging out for like a couple of decades. So
yeah, right.
I appreciate that. That's very kind. So yeah, I'd love to come back. Let's do some more in this. I think it's a whole huge conversation still. I think we just scratched the surface, but regardless, I appreciate your time today. This is nice.
You too. Thank you. Wait, it's not over yet. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Pound This podcast. If you're looking for more motivation, don't worry, I got you. Check out my meal prep cookbook, your beginner's guide to meal prepping, 16 recipes, all with videos. You can find the Bite This meal prep cookbook on my website at AmandaValentineBites.com. Also, join me on a meal prepping, off-roading, hiking trip in Moab with Explorer Chick. More details on that on my Facebook page at Amanda Valentine Bites. Don't forget about the Bite This Bagel seasoning to make all of your healthy foods taste a little bit better. Links for that also at AmandaValentineBites.com. And don't forget Meal Prep Sunday on my Instagram. Every Sunday, I'll walk you through my meal prep process, so follow me at You Can Pound This.